Hi, everyone. Thank you for the warm CMX welcome. It's always one of my favorite conferences to go to and just be with my people. Just feels so good to be in a room full of people who get community. And I always learn so much these events. When I go back to work on Monday, I'm just like, oh my God, brain overload, so many ideas. And so my talk is really designed to help you kind of filter through what you've learned today and feel really confident that you're working on the things that will help you the most in your career and for your community and for your company's goals. Because what I've learned over the last 10-ish years is that doing more does not guarantee more impact. Doing more doesn't mean you're going to get more results, doesn't mean you're going to get more respect internally, doesn't mean you're going to have more success, and it also doesn't bring more joy. So that's really what we're here to talk about, that when I slowed down and did a lot less, a lot more of the things that I wanted to achieve kind of fell into place. So that's what we're here, doing less to do more for community professionals, kind of giving you the speed notes of everything I've learned over the last decade. So a little bit about me. Please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'd love to say hi. I love to connect with other community professionals and just chat about whatever you're working on at the moment. I just joined EA. Before that, I was at Discord for 3 years. Before that, I was at Patreon and lucky enough to work for Imager as well. So got to work for some great community-centric companies, but for most of my career, I felt like this. I felt overwhelmed, out of control. Who can resonate with this cat of just feeling not sure what to work on next, and I didn't have time to work on the things that I knew would make the most impact on the community. So here are the field notes of how to do less to do more. So we're going to cover why I believe our industry especially is at risk for overcommitment and kind of the internal impact when you take on too much work. How to work on the right things and say no, kind of a little cheat sheet on how to say no for people who find it difficult. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have a couple of minutes to sort of bask in the newfound freedom that we've all uncovered together. So one of the attributes I think makes community uniquely susceptible to overcommitting is just how vast our field is. I mean, one day during a week, we could be in meetings that cover brand marketing, event marketing, social media marketing. We might be doing data science or user research. Then we might be jumping into a more technical capacity where we're writing bug tickets and talking to engineers. I think we don't talk enough about how awesome we are and how difficult it is to context switch so much. And that's on top of often we're really involved in employee resource groups, mentoring folks, we're networking. And I think when any day or week covers so many different industries and you agree even to one small thing in each of those settings, that work starts to really build up. I've also noticed that we tend to be people pleasers. I'm not sure if anyone resonates with that. I think it's something about being motivated by helping others, that we just love to help people, even internally, and that can lead to some negative effects down the line. And then on the flip side, just to get a little personal for a second, I actually noticed that I was developing a defensive attitude at work because I felt like I always had to convince people why community mattered, why they should care about what I was saying, why they should invest in community more. I was always starting off on this sort of defensive foot, and I didn't really let the results speak for themselves. Also, work FOMO is a thing, apparently. I'm definitely guilty of it, and studies have shown that we say yes to things even if they aren't inherently valuable to us, but because we like to feel valued and important and a part of the club. And I've definitely been guilty of just saying yes to every meeting invite just because I'm like, oh wow, they want me to join, they care about community, I'm going to say yes. And then until you know it, you're in back-to-back meetings and you have no time to work on what you actually want to be doing. And then lastly, our work is highly visible. We're often the front lines, we're sometimes the public image of the company, and that really starts to blur the lines between where a profession ends and our personal life starts, which means that we're often taking on a lot more. So When you kind of put all that together, I call it a veritable pea soup of factors. And what I found was the result of all of these different combinations was I was taking on far too much work, too many projects, too many meetings. I was getting DMs and group DMs 24/7 from internal people as well as external community members. I was multitasking, so in a meeting, I wasn't actually paying attention. I was probably working on a deck or responding to people, which meant that I was missing important context in that meeting. The quality of my work was lowering, and I was working late to try and keep up, which led to burnout. And it's kind of satisfying to know that this has been proven by science, that when we're in meetings back to back to back, our cognitive functions actually lower, and the more meetings you're in without a break, the higher your stress levels. And I'm sure we've all felt that, where you're on meeting 3 or 4 in a row, and you're a little bit more agitated, a little bit more irritable, and it's not your fault. It's because it's just how the brain works. And Laura Vanderkam wrote a really great book about this called Tranquility by Tuesday. And she made me realize that we are all taking mental breaks all the time. It's just that many times they're unconscious. Maybe at the start of a meeting, if you haven't taken a break, you're kind of switching off. Maybe you're scrolling TikTok, and then you suddenly realize, oh God, I meant to be paying attention. So by choosing when and how to take a break, you'll notice that break happening and reap the rejuvenation. So we're going to talk about that in more detail later on. And the reason why this topic is really important to me is it was causing long-term professional harm. This is personally for me, because every time I was in a meeting, I had a chance to shape how I was perceived and how the community industry is understood. It's still a new industry. There's a lot of misconceptions. And so every time I wasn't fully present in a meeting, I wasn't able to come in with a relevant data fact or a quote from the community. I was harming my own goals and my own job of why I was there. So the more you can kind of slow down and be in tune with what you're sharing, investing in cross-functional relationships, the more you're likely to get the kind of things that you're after. So hopefully we now kind of agree that this is definitely a problem, so let's dive into how to reverse this trend. And there's quite a lot in here, so I apologize for how dense this is, but we're going to start off really high level. We're going to clarify your why and talk about strategy for a second. Then we're going to move on to your what. So what are you actually doing and how to set goals? And then once we have those 2 pieces in place, the fun stuff really happens, because we can just ruthlessly prioritize everything that you're working on with this new framework. So let's start with the why. And I would love for you all just to sort of reflect, why are you doing this work? Why has your company hired you? Why did you choose this role? Why are you passionate about the community that you're serving? Because that's really where all of this needs to start from. If you've lost sight of that, the rest of this is going to be trickier. And the other thing that I think everyone should hopefully have a good grasp on are these 4 things. Everything starts here. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, everything else is going to be a lot difficult. So mentally check yourself. Is there a slide or a document that has these 4 things written down for your work? Mission is all about what you're doing now, who you're doing it for, and what it achieves. Your vision is really about where you're going, what you want that mission to ultimately achieve for you or your customers or society, so really where you want to go. Your values, what do you stand for? How are you going to do this work and carry out your goals, so how you'll do it. And then lastly, your goals. These are the tangible ways that you'll be carrying out your mission as you progress towards your vision. So these 4 things are really important. And then lastly, just to go into the goals a little bit more, ideally they will cascade, but I will say even in my career, this is very rare that it ever works as beautifully like this. Sometimes you're having to write your own goals, your department doesn't have goals, your company doesn't have goals. So don't worry too much about that. But definitely having a sense of what you're working on for the next 3, 6, 12, 24 months, it's a really good habit to get into. And there's lots of different frameworks out there. I saw OKRs in the previous slide. The SMART framework is really helpful if you're brand new to making them. And here are some goals that I've seen in communities that I've worked with in the past. And they're not bad because I think they're a bad goal. I think they're both fantastic goals to strive for, but just more about how they're written. Improve the community, grow the community. These are kind of relatively vague terms. One level next up is increase positive community sentiment. Okay, we're starting to get a sense of what we're trying to do here. And then perhaps sort of the gold level standard is if you can have a time frame, a measurable goal, how you'll know if you've been successful, and also why we chose that goal. So I think that's really important too, internally for people to understand. The reason we want to increase positive sentiment now is because next quarter we've got this huge launch coming, and we don't want to launch that to a bunch of angry people. So that can sometimes help people couch it. Just some best practices for crafting long-term goals. Involve stakeholders at each stage. Let people know, hey, I'm going to write some goals for the team. Would love for you to be a stakeholder in that process. Give me feedback. If as you're writing them, you're like, oh my God, there's so many things that's going to make this impossible. We call that obstacles in the business. That's okay. Write them down. Note down any dependencies that you would need to do your goal. And then that helps you make sure they're realistic and achievable. And then make sure you're keeping them visible. Nothing worse than when you just make goals, put them in a deck, and then you never look at them again. So keep them visible, sticky notes on your monitor, or get into the practice of every weekly team sync. Go through them, just talk about them and kind of live them. So my ethos with goals is done is better than perfect. Please don't spend 6 weeks writing the most beautiful goals and then you only have 6 weeks left to achieve them. Just start somewhere and the rest will follow. So now we know why we're doing it. We have our high-level strategy. We want to increase the positive community sentiment by 5%. The team has loads of fantastic ideas on how we could do that, but how are we going to pick? How do you narrow it down into what you'll actually work on next? And I learned that there's different prioritization frameworks that can help you when making different decisions. So when prioritizing between projects, you're making one big decision. What will my team invest in next? So you want to apply a rigorous process to that. Versus when you're prioritizing within a project, you're going to be making lots of small decisions, and that's where you want to have more of a ruthless mindset. So we're going to talk about the first one. We're going to decide what project to work on next. And there's this fun sort of puzzle you can create that helps you decide. So we're going to do this together. We're going to estimate the ROI, the return on investment for each project. We're going to apply the 3 constraints that normally always exist, which are dependencies, timelines, and team. And then when we put that together, it will tell us what we should work on. So let's imagine we have 4 projects. We're going to guess. Rough, I'm terrible at math, but we're going to guess the value and the time to build, and that will give us the ROI. We're likely to be a little bit wrong on all of them, so that's okay. And normally I double the effort and half the customer value or the impact, and I found that's closer to reality. So let's say the team was really excited about doing giveaways. Another team wants us to do webinars. We're really passionate about interviews, and then we could also just do one flagship event. If we assume 100 is the highest, I just made up these numbers. Please don't take it personally if you're a really big fan of giveaways. But I thought giveaways, they might bring customers 30% of a total 100 value. They're pretty quick to build, so the ROI is quite high. Webinars would probably be more valuable for my ideal customer, but they're going to take me a lot longer to build. An interview series would be valuable to some of our customers. Not everyone is going to benefit from that, and it takes a little less time. A flagship event, hugely valuable, hugely time-consuming. So this is our map. Let's say that giveaways win for the highest ROI. So now we're going to apply our 3 constraints. Is there a unit of work that needs to be completed in order for our work to progress? Is there something on the horizon, a launch, a change that would alter our plans? And then ultimately, the team composition. Do you have the right level of experience, the budget, any agency resources that you can use? So let's say for doing this exercise for the giveaways, we actually uncover that our legal team are not going to let us do giveaways because they need to write a new terms of service, and that's going to take 3 months, which is too long for us to wait. So we're going to strike off the giveaways. We can't wait for the dependency. So now let's look at webinars and interviews. So the next thing I like to do is sort of put them on a timeline. If you remember, the webinars are going to take 8 weeks. They have the highest ROI. But when we start mapping out where that would get us, oh no, we're not going to have enough time because there's a launch that's coming, and we really need to launch these in the next 6 weeks. So then we will do the interviews first. And the reason that is a good choice here is because it's within the time constraint. Once we've shipped those interviews, we've unlocked that customer value, we're delivering the benefit, and internally we've now unblocked other teams to use those interviews for PR, for social, for content, and then we can move onto the webinars next. So that's a little exercise that can be really helpful in trying to figure out what big thing to work on next. And another sort of framework that I like to use if you're ever just feeling stuck is the get, who, to, buy framework. It's very simple, which can really help clear thinking. So who's your target consumer? What's their problem? What do you want them to do? And what's the message or action that you want to take? So I just normally do this once I know I have a project I want to do, write a quick get, who, to, buy. So for the webinars example, we want to get existing community admins who have been successful keeping their Discord servers engaged. We want them to agree to being interviewed by us so that we can create a launch plan that will identify them and excite them and want them to be involved. And the sort of ethos for this section is, what you work on today will make tomorrow. So even if you can only take small steps, it's really a great exercise to kind of do one of those ROI results. So now we know what you're going to work on and why. Let's review how your time is actually being spent on achieving those goals. One thing that I like to do is apply a doomsday scenario. If you only had 30 minutes to do one thing to achieve your goal, what would that be? AKA, this is what's the single most important thing you have to do to achieve your goal. So by kind of time boxing and putting this unrealistic constraint, you get a clearer picture of what's important to you. So for the user interview series, if I only had 30 minutes to do one thing to help me achieve that goal, it would probably be creating a list of users, maybe starting to outreach to my best, and that would be the one thing that I would have to achieve that day. For a more rigorous exercise, this is something that I often like to do if folks are feeling really overwhelmed with how much work they're doing, is to just log what you're doing every week. Maybe create some categories and just jot down, 30 minutes here, 2 hours here, and you can kind of think of yourself as a freelancer billing yourself to different projects. And at the end of the week, take a look at the data, tally up some of the categories, and you can kind of go through an exercise of seeing how does this feel to you? Is this the right amount of time? If you spent 4 hours maybe joining a support team meeting and you didn't contribute in any of those meetings, it's probably a sign that maybe you could step back from some of those meetings or send someone else to attend instead. And then this is another exercise if you use Asana and you have a huge backlog of tasks. The 4 Ds of task domination, this is something I like to do also with myself and with teams. Kind of the 4 different ways you can approach any task that's on your to-do list. You could just delay it, put it on the backlog, but sometimes doing that intentionally feels really good. Like, I see this work, I'm not going to do it now, I'm going to choose to come back to it later. You could distribute. Maybe a task should or could be done by someone else. Ask for their help. It's always there for us, even though it can be hard to do. You can diminish a task. Maybe it is important, but you can't do the full extent of it. So make it smaller, which would give you more space to work on other things, or just delete it. Sometimes I've just stopped doing work and no one has noticed because it wasn't actually that important to them. And maybe it's a good exercise to see if you stop doing that thing that you've just been doing for months and no one comes asking you for it. Yeah, probably it's okay. Wait for them to come back and ask you for it. This is another quadrant that's also just really useful to have in your back pocket if you're ever like, I just got so much on. Just make the urgent and important quadrant. Then you can really quickly see what is the most important thing you've got to do right now, which would be urgent and important. Important work that's not urgent is work that you really should be planning and blocking off time in your calendar to start planning for. If it's urgent but not important, how can you delegate it? Can you tell someone else, hey, this is on fire, not my problem, but someone should probably look at that. And then not urgent and not important, that's some of the work that you should probably just stop and see what happens if you do that, so you can really focus on that number 1 quadrant. And the mindset that's really helped me here, and I loved that an earlier talk talked about mindset too, is when you start saying yes to work, you're actually potentially saying no to your own goals. And once you start thinking like this, it makes you reframe work a lot differently. So now if I say yes to work, I'll try and say yes and. So like, yes, I will help you with that project, And here's what I want in return. Or if you say yes, can you bend it towards your own goals? So yes, we will agree to do that, but only if you also include a community member in your social promotion. Now we're saying yes, but because we have that clear vision of where we're going, we can actually start to influence and creatively bend the work that we were going to do anyway, but to serve our benefits too. Or sometimes we have to say no, and that's okay. If there's no way this work will help you achieve your goals, start saying no. It's a little scary at first, but it's actually kind of addictive once you start doing it. And so here's my sort of like way to feel good about saying no to work. Once you know your workload, it's very easy to see that taking on more just isn't going to be possible. So that, on a first hand, makes it a lot easier, versus if you're just going from one thing to one thing, you kind of don't have a sense anymore about what your bandwidth and your capabilities is. So you know your workload, if someone comes to you with a task, there's just no way. Lead with positivity, politely and clearly decline, explain why, offer a solution, and then remember to be empathetic. So in practice, this might look like, hey, thank you so much for reaching out to me about this opportunity. Sounds great, and I know the community would love it. However, the team is at capacity this quarter, but we would love to prioritize it for Q3. Or, thank you so much for thinking about us for this. It's so cool to see that you want to involve the community in your plans. It's not going to happen, unfortunately, on that time frame. I'd love to grab 30 minutes of you to brainstorm how we could do this a different way. So you're kind of saying no, explaining why, and offering them something else. So it's not just a hard no, you're kind of offering them a carrot to say sorry about saying no. And then, of course, it is hard to be told no, so we're all very busy, so just understanding that it's probably going to suck, but you're doing your best to help them achieve their goals too. Another sort of small hack that I like to share is, instead of just saying, I don't have time, start saying it's not a current priority. This makes you sound a lot more strategic, that you've made a decision to not work on something, which just elevates your work a lot more than saying, I don't have time, I don't have the bandwidth. That makes it sound like it's your fault. It's not your fault if you don't have the time. It's because there is more work than there are resources, and it's not worth you burning yourself out over. So say, yeah, that sounds great. It's not a current priority, but if you ever want to discuss the priorities, I'd be happy to, and you can see what else we're doing this quarter. Small change, but it can have a big difference. So hopefully you have some newfound focus and freedom. If any of these tips helps you save 1 minute, if you do them next week, that would make me very happy. If it can help you a little bit more, I've got some suggestions. So if you get 1 minute back from doing some of today's exercises, use it to breathe, just pause, take a stretch, take a walk between meetings. It's never going to be a waste of time to do that. If you get perhaps an hour back from doing this exercise, use it to reflect on your goals. Block that time off and just look at my goals and maybe report how far along I am to them. And not only report on them, but actually share out. I feel like that's something also that we could get better at, is the internal marketing, sharing out your goals, and making sure people realize the impact that community is having. And then really, if you get any amount of time back, I think using it to build team morale is so important. Have you had a happy hour with your colleagues lately? Have you just got online together and played some games? Have you asked people, what did you get up to this weekend? I honestly think that that's always a great use of time if you can get any amount of time back. So thank you. I hope this really helped. Go forth and subtract from your calendar so you can have more time to work on the things that you and your community need the most, and that you as professionals will all know will drive the most impact for your communities. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the event.